Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. For the past 40 years, I ran the garment factory to support our family, while my husband David devoted himself to chasing his poetic dreams. When he was on his deathbed, he clutched a uniquely shaped stone in his hand and kept whispering the name of his first love. Back in the day, life moved slowly, and a lifetime seemed only long enough to love one person. Our daughter Emily later published their story, and it moved countless readers to tears, wishing the two teachers a chance to be together in their next life. Damn those arranged marriages. Poor Mr. Gu had to spend his whole life with a woman he didn't love. She read those comments aloud to me as I lay in my hospital bed. I closed my eyes in despair and sorrow. Mom, why are you reacting like that? Dad and Miss Emma missed their chance in this life. You were the one who benefited from it. What more do you want? Tears slid from the corners of my eyes. Choked with resentment, I died. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the very day someone came to negotiate the purchase of the garment factory. This time, they could have their romantic ideals. I would build my own future with Xiaoyang. The old radio crackled with songs that carried the distinct flavor of the 1980s. I knew for certain I had been reborn. In the courtyard, David was animatedly telling a story to young Emily, holding that heart-shaped stone in his hand. In my previous life, I had always known that stone was a farewell gift from his first love. At first, I didn't care. After all, who didn't have a few romantic memories from their youth? But what I hadn't expected was that David would think about her until his dying breath, still gripping that heart-shaped stone in his palm. And I, his wife for nearly 4 decades, didn't even know her name. It wasn't until after he died, when I was sorting through his belongings, that I found a bundle of letters hidden in the bedding. They spanned 40 years. But David and I had only been married for 39. At the bottom of the letters was the name Emma. It was only then that I realized he had named our daughter Emily, a combination of Emma and family, perhaps. The thought made my stomach twist. I clutched my chest in pain and crumpled the freshly delivered stationery in my hand. But then I slowly unfolded it. Miss Soon, this really is a fair price. If it's still not enough, I'll add another 20,000. Just sell us the factory and I'll give you 5% profit every month. I closed my eyes and made the opposite decision from my past life. With difficulty, I raised my hand and wrote 2 words on the back of the contract. Deal closed. In my previous life, I worked tirelessly to keep that garment factory running and supported every expense of our household. Meanwhile, David was immersed in poetry and literature, chasing his dream of being an artist, which brought in almost no income. Even so, our daughter still idolized him, determined to carry on his legacy. She was deeply touched by the story of David and Emma, a love that never had a chance. Back then, life moved slowly. A lifetime seemed just long enough to love one person. But what about me? What did my 40 years of sacrifice mean to them? All that resentment that had consumed me before I died now surged back. Thankfully, I had been given a second chance. This time, they could pursue their poetic dreams. I would build my own Xiaoyang. Maybe I had stared for too long because the 2 of them in the courtyard finally noticed me. Emily glanced at me, then lovingly hugged that heart-shaped stone like a treasure. Dad, if you hadn't been forced into an arranged marriage with Mom, would you have been with Miss Emma instead? David gently covered her mouth and said softly, Emily, keep your voice down. Your mom will be upset if she hears that. Emily grinned mischievously. It's fine. Mom doesn't get it. She's just good at business and calculating things. She doesn't understand how we modern people think. Those words felt like a massive slap across my face. Fighting back the ache in my heart, I stuffed the letter into my pocket and headed for the post office in town. Fine, let's see how they plan to survive on nothing but poetry and romance now that I won't be there to manage everything for them. By the time I got back, it was already evening. The handover procedures would take a week to finalize by the end of the month. That would be just enough time for me to wrap up everything properly. The income from the past few years, combined with the money from the buyout, was more than enough for me to live comfortably elsewhere. When David saw me return, he paced back and forth in the front yard and hurried over to me, chattering nonstop. Shun, make something really nice for lunch tomorrow. Don't use the rough rice. Use the best one. Oh, and use the ration ticket to get some pork if possible. I'll butcher that duck in the backyard too. His hands clapped with excitement, barely able to contain his joy. I asked him who was coming over. In my memory from the previous life, there hadn't been any day that called for such elaborate preparations. Just then, Emily poked her head out with a gleam in her eye and said, "It's Miss Emma. Dad sent her an invitation a few days ago, and today he finally got a reply." A creeping unease took hold in my heart. In my last life, I never once met Emma, so why would she appear in this one? I turned to look at David and happened to catch a gleam in his eyes. Something that didn't belong in the eyes of a man in his 30s. So, it wasn't just me who had regrets in that past life. I wasn't the only one who had come back. But that was fine. I was genuinely curious how David, with all his flowery poetry and lofty sentiments, would entertain the woman he had idealized for so long. Money is tangible. It can be traded for rice and a stable life. But friendship, it barely fills a glass of water. The next morning, before the rooster even crowed, David was already up boiling water, cleaning the house, busy as if it were Chinese New Year. In the 40-plus years of our last life together, he had never once gotten up early, let alone willingly cleaned anything. Turns out it wasn't that he couldn't, it was that he didn't care enough to. "Mom, why are you still in bed? Emma's coming soon. Hurry up and get ready." Emily shoved me with a pout that could hold a whole basket of vegetables. David walked in with a broom in hand and said, "Emily, go tell your mom to go buy groceries." He glanced sideways at me, and his smile instantly vanished, replaced by disdain and superiority. "Emma and I are both educated people, so don't half-ass things, and please don't haggle over every cent like you always do. It's embarrassing." I forced a smile, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "Without all my penny pinching, where would you and your father get your food and clothes?" Emily raised her chin proudly and said, "Dad said money is earned, not saved. Stop twisting the facts." Looking at her face, which mirrored David's so perfectly, made my heart ache. If only I had been reborn 10 years earlier, then maybe I wouldn't be stuck with a child I couldn't put back. David, as always, played the peacemaker. All right. Don't argue with your mom. She has it tough too." Then he turned to me again, instructing me carefully. "Make sure to get 2 extra fish tonight. Emma loves fish. One should be for soup, and the other braised. And don't forget, the sugar's precious these days, but she deserves the best." Clearly, in this life he had forgotten everything about our past. All he wanted now was to give his white moonlight everything perfect. I couldn't hold back anymore. "What about me, David?" I asked. "What am I to you? What do I like to eat? Do you even care?" He froze, caught completely off guard. "You can have some of the soup too, can't you?" The air suddenly became suffocating before the tears could fall. I turned and walked out. David and I had been engaged since we were kids, what Emily would now call a relic of feudalism. He and Emma had met as educated youths sent to the countryside. His family once had a scholarly background, but times had changed, and when it came time for marriage, they couldn't offer much of a dowry. All he had were a few calligraphy scrolls he had written himself. That relationship eventually fizzled out, and became the unattainable dream of his life. When he returned to the village, he married me. I built the garment factory from a small workshop into something with real scale. In my past life, I supported the so-called scholar who never once got his hands dirty, who only knew poetry, and never learned how to cook a meal or manage a household. Now reborn, he thought this life would be just as easy and comfortable as the last. But love, true devotion, had already been exhausted in our last life. In this life, I wasn't going to support either David or Emily anymore. As I returned to the courtyard, I saw a few pieces of luggage already at the gate. Our guest had arrived. Hearing the sound of me coming in, David turned around with a smile still lingering on his lips. "Why are you back so late? Emma's starving." He reached out to take my basket, but when he saw it was completely empty, his face darkened. "You didn't buy anything? What's Emma supposed to eat? Shun, are you doing this on purpose?" He yanked the basket and flung it toward the vegetable patch. I used all the strength I had to suppress the bitterness and anger churning inside me. "David, I said, my voice shaking. I'm not that pathetic. Taking care of you used to mean something, because I loved you. But taking care of Emma? What do you think I am, your maid? He frowned. It's just a meal. Emma traveled all this way. Why are you being so unreasonable? I pointed at the pile of luggage, my hand trembling. And after she eats, then where is she going? David opened and closed his mouth, clearly flustered. His voice weakened. I just invited Emma to come experience life here. Just stay a few days. Are you really going to be this petty? If you get hung up on something this small, you've really got the narrow mind of a housewife. I pushed him aside and walked straight into the house. Emma and Emily were chatting and laughing together like they were a real family. When Emma saw me, she stood up politely. Hello, Miss Sunday, nice to meet you. I'm Emma. I had always imagined that when I finally saw Emma, I'd lose control, scream, maybe even throw something. But the reality was surprisingly calm. Too calm, perhaps. After all, I had the soul of a woman in her 60s. In my previous life, Emma never once stepped into my world. It was David who I pined after endlessly. But I wasn't a saint. I couldn't pretend to welcome her with a warm smile. I walked past her, locked myself inside my room. And only then did I feel like I could breathe again. Mom, where's the food? What are you even doing in there? Emily knocked impatiently on the door, and eventually gave it a loud kick in frustration. I heard David outside, his voice trying to explain. I don't know what's gotten into your mom today. Let's go eat out, the three of us. Their voices gradually faded as they headed off together. A gust of wind blew through the curtains and brushed against my cheek. Only then did I realize my face was already soaked in tears. I cried and cried as if letting go of both this life and the last. And when the storm passed, I reminded myself, I am Shun, no longer someone's mother, no longer someone's wife. I stood up with determination and began to sort through all the valuable things in the house. In my pocket was the bus ticket I had bought that morning. A few days later, once the transfer of the garment factory was complete, I would leave for good. But just then, someone from town came rushing to tell me that David, Emily, and Emma were being held at a restaurant because they couldn't pay the bill. Trying to show off in front of Emma, David had ordered imported wine. When I arrived, his face was flushed with embarrassment. Emily rushed to me, tugging my sleeve. Mom, come on, pay the bill. Dad's short on cash. David never managed finances, neither in the past life nor this one. Every household expense had always fallen on me. I slowly pulled my hand away and raised my voice. I'm the only one keeping this household afloat. Supporting your father's writing and poetry has already drained everything we have. I wiped away non-existent tears from the corner of my eye. Around us, the other diners who heard what I said couldn't help but shake their heads in disapproval. Unbelievable, someone muttered. What kind of man lets his wife carry the burden while he sits around dreaming? David's face turned an awful shade. Humiliated, he muttered under his breath. Shun, can you just cover it for now? Emma and our daughter are here. Don't make a scene. Emma shrank back awkwardly, clearly unprepared for this kind of public embarrassment. I suggested to the restaurant owner that they put it on a tab and let David handle the payment later. But David, unwilling to let go of his so-called dignity as a man of letters, chose instead to clench his jaw and dig into his pocket. He took off the silver ring on his finger and placed it on the table. I'll leave this as collateral. I'll come back to redeem it. My eyes fixed on the silver ring. A familiar warmth welled up in my eyes. That ring had been a symbol of our marriage, the only decent thing he could offer me back then. And now he was willing to pawn it without a second thought. So be it. At that moment, whatever love or hate had existed between us over 2 lifetimes was completely extinguished. I turned to leave. David chased after me, flustered. Soon I'll get it back later. I promise. Don't be mad. I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. You'll redeem it, David. With what? Your poems, your essays? His eyes dimmed. Then he lashed out in that familiar defensive tone. Do you have to humiliate me like this? Don't you understand that money is just a worldly possession? Only literature and art are eternal, untouchable. I stopped walking. Sorry, I said coldly. I'm just a woman who does business and calculates profits. I don't understand that nonsense. I turned to glance at Emma and Emily, who were following at a distance. Go find someone who does. David stood there frozen in shame. I didn't care about his dark and sullen expression. I went straight home without looking back. A few days later, trying to save face in front of Emma, David brought her to my garment factory to pick out some nicely tailored outfits. I silently gathered the transfer documents against my chest and instructed the staff to log the expenses at full market price. No rush, soon enough, the new owner would come to collect. Once the final payment for the factory came through, I packed my bags. I was set to leave the next day. David noticed the pile of luggage and asked, "Where are you going?" I brushed him off with a vague, "Just a short trip." He gave me a wistful smile. "Sin, you always think of everything. You remembered tomorrow's my birthday, didn't you? You even packed the bags for everyone. Great. The four of us can go on a nice trip together." I was almost stunned by his confidence. I had to fight the urge to laugh. "The four of us," he said, so certain I'd been to his wishes, as if he truly believed Emma had long become part of our family. That's right. Last time I supported him for over 40 years and still couldn't compete with a heart-shaped stone. I laughed until tears streamed down my face again. In the distance, the faint silhouette of the moon was still visible. Inside the house, everyone remained fast asleep. I had seen skies like this countless times in my previous life, rising early for the sake of our family's survival. But from this moment forward, everything I did would be for myself. Dragging along my simple luggage, I boarded the long-distance bus to the city and waited for the train to Shenzhen. About 10 minutes before departure, I heard a familiar voice outside the station yelling, "Shun, wait, I need to talk to you." It was David. He was being held back by staff, looking like some crazed troublemaker. There was none of that scholarly elegance he used to pride himself on. I sat down my suitcase and looked at him through the fence. He was panting as he tried to explain. "Emma's life back home wasn't easy. That's why I brought her here. It's not like our family couldn't afford to feed her. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Nothing ever happened between us. You're really leaving over this?" Yes. In both this life and the last, nothing had ever physically happened between them. But emotional infidelity is still betrayal. In fact, it can last even longer than the physical kind. It simmers in the mind, festering, becoming deeper and harder to erase. I couldn't imagine it anymore. 40 years in my previous life with David quietly holding another woman in his heart while still marrying me, having children with me, and sharing my bed for decades. It was disgusting. I let out a soft chuckle. "David, so because her life was hard, you brought her here and expected me to take care of her. Where in the world do you find arrangements that convenient? All those years of reading books, did you learn nothing? The people closest to you always know where to stab you deepest." David's greatest fear was being seen as a failure despite a lifetime of reading and writing. As expected, he stepped back sharply. "Shun, you really are vicious with your words." He gritted his teeth. "If it weren't for that childhood engagement, do you really think I would have married a woman like you? Always calculating and money-minded." I tilted my head slightly, speaking slowly and clearly. "You married me because Emma turned you down. She couldn't stand being with a broke poet. In our past life, he lived comfortably off me. It made him mistakenly believe he was competent and self-sufficient. And in this life, he thought he could once again take everything without giving anything back." He flung his sleeve. "Fine, Chin. If you leave now, don't come crawling back later. When you're crying and begging to return, I won't recognize you as my wife." The train whistle blew. I picked up my suitcase and looked one last time at that place. "Don't worry," I said. "I won't be coming back." The train rocked gently as it carried a soul long exhausted toward its rightful home. 1980 Shenzhen. I wasn't highly educated, but I remembered that this was the place to be. In my past life, I stayed behind, clinging to a small garment factory, wasting my youth for the sake of the family. I never had the chance to witness this era's incredible rise. The moment my feet touched the ground, the blazing morning sun poured over me. Everything around me was vibrant, full of promise. Not just the times, but me too. I was Shun, 30 years old, with all the energy and ambition I had once buried. I rented a small room for myself. Life was simple, but it was filled with hope. Carrying a few handmade clothing samples, I went straight to the largest garment factory in the area. With the experience from my previous life, I quickly landed a job. The hum of the sewing machines echoed like a rhythm for a new chapter. Turns out, once I left that little town, the world outside wasn't as terrifying as I'd imagined. I met people I had never encountered before. I saw landscapes I had never dared to dream of. "Miss Shun, I heard you're about to be promoted to workshop supervisor," a cheerful young woman with braided pigtails asked me, grinning. I sat down the fabric in my hands and smiled, nodding gently. One evening, as I was leaving work like usual, a filthy man suddenly ran up and grabbed my arm. I instinctively swung my bag to hit him. "It's me, Shun." "Stop." The man was David. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked completely worn out. "Come home with me, Shun. Everything's a mess at home. What are you still doing here?" I shook off his wrists coldly. "I'm not going back. Do you know how much I've suffered just trying to find you?" He snapped. "I searched every garment factory in Shenzhen before I finally found this one." He held up his hand, which was covered in scrapes and bruises. I looked at it without emotion. "That has nothing to do with me. If this little scratch counts as suffering, then what about the hundreds of scars I had on my hands in our past life?" He recoiled, clearly wounded, and silently pulled his hand back. "What about Emily? Are you going to abandon her, too? Are you trying to let us starve?" I shot back. "You've got your poems, your moonlit strolls, your verses beneath the flowers. Why would someone like you care about money and food? And as for Emily, why don't you let Emma take care of her? After all, you three are one big happy family now, aren't you?" His fists clenched at his sides, his posture still unnaturally upright like a pine tree in winter. "Shun, stop this. You know, inspiration is everything when it comes to writing. I can't write when I'm hungry. And besides, when you married me, you were just a practical woman. People like us, scholars and artists, we weren't a good match from the start. But I married you anyway. You didn't exactly lose out, did you? So come home. We need you." He said all of this with such forced dignity as if asking for help was beneath him, a stain on his pride. I almost laughed out loud from the absurdity. "David," I said, "you're the type who throws down your bowl and curses the cook, then cries to her when you're hungry again. You fake humility better than any wolf in sheep's clothing." He took 2 steps back, stunned, and mumbled, "Shun, you weren't like this in our past life." I finished the sentence for him. "Why have I changed in this one?" The shock on his face was plain as day. "Shun, you're reborn too." I smiled faintly, not confirming, not denying. "Heaven is fair. You got the chance to reunite with your precious Emma under the moonlight. And I got the chance to relive my own life. David, in this life, you don't need to write those thick love letters anymore. You won't need to miss her in secret." His pupils contracted. "You saw them?" "I did," I replied. "I saw it all. Saw how ridiculous I looked in that previous life." While he stood there frozen, I turned and stepped onto the bus. He pounded on the window, completely abandoning any pretense of grace. "Shun, wait, I'm not done. Let me explain." But the vehicle pulled away, carrying me and everything I once was away into the golden sunset of the 1980s. The next day, several people from my hometown who had also come to Shenzhen found out David had been loitering outside my workplace. Some of them had arrived a few months after me, and were now sharing business connections. "Sister Shun, you have no idea. After you left, that so-called teacher David pawned the old house just to get by." I set down my measuring tape, suddenly interested. "What happened? Tell me everything. I'll treat you all to drinks tonight." A few heads gathered close. One of them chuckled. "You don't know, Sister Shin. That guy still looks like a prim and proper scholar, but every few days he goes to your old factory and picks out the nicest clothes to wear. You should have seen him eat. It was embarrassing." And I asked, "Well," someone said, leaning in, "they didn't know you weren't coming back, so they kept racking up credit with your old factory. The new owner finally got tired of it and asked them to settle the bill. But David couldn't stand to see Emma embarrassed, so he used up all his savings to cover her debt." I lowered my head and smiled. David really was willing to give everything to his precious moonlight. A few years ago, When my factory was struggling, I had asked him if he had any extra money. He only told me that life was hard, but he had never been one to save. Even a few months ago when he ordered expensive imported wine, he did so expecting I would come pay for it. The girls saw me lower my head, and mistakenly thought I was feeling down. "Don't be sad, Shun," one of them said quickly. "We were just joking." I tilted my head back and laughed. "What's there to be sad about?" They went on asking, "But what happened to their old house?" "Well, David the deadbeat had to take care of Emma and still had to feed his daughter. The house couldn't hold out. Word is," another chimed in, "that now the whole bunch of them are crammed into some rundown shack." The factory whistle blew for the end of the shift. I stood up and waved. "Let's go, ladies. Karaoke's on me tonight." They cheered, laughing even louder than before. We changed out of our work uniforms, put on fitted skirts and oversized sunglasses. Outside, the neon lights were dazzling and loud. This kind of life. I never got to experience it in my past life. Just a few steps out, I heard a sharp voice shout, "Mom, what the hell are you wearing? It's indecent." I turned around and saw Emily. Her hair was greasy, hanging in stringy clumps, but her eyes still carried that clueless innocence of someone detached from the world. And standing not far behind her was David. He had brought Emily here, thinking I would soften at the sight. But I hadn't forgotten how in my past life I rose before dawn and worked until late just to fund Emily's education to give her the opportunity to see a world beyond our tiny town. And what did I get in return? When I was gravely ill, she praised David and Emma's love story. Their missed chance as if it were a romantic tragedy. And it killed me with rage. I gritted my teeth and slowly pried her fingers off my sleeve. "Don't call me Mom. Go find your precious Emma." She stomped a few steps forward, glaring at us and yelled, "Mom, you've gone rotten, just like all those city women." Grabbing at the hem of my skirt, she looked like a moral guardian, ready to scream indecency. "Look at what you're wearing. You're 30. Don't you feel ashamed dressing like that?" One of the girls beside me slapped her hand away. "So what if she's 30? Even if Sister Sean is 40, 50, or 100, she can wear whatever she wants. What's it to you?" Another coworker chimed in, wrinkling her nose. "She really does stink like a walking sour mood." I could smell it from across the street. Emily was still just 9 years old in this life. Her eyes quickly filled with tears. She turned toward David and asked uncertainly, "Dad, didn't you say people like them have empty, filthy souls? That's why they use all these flashy things to fill up their pitiful little brains. Isn't that right?" David looked away, too embarrassed to answer. The girl with the braids rolled her eyes and leaned against my shoulder. "Yeah, not everyone can feel full just eating poetry and ink, right, Sister Zoo?" I patted her head gently. "You're absolutely right." Emily looked stunned as if that small gesture had pierced her. Tears welled up again. "You're my mom. Why are you being nice to other people? You're only allowed to pat me, not anyone else." David rushed forward to cover her mouth. "Emily, be good. Please, just ask your mom to come home with us. She loves you the most." I sighed. Then I looked at David and said with weary patience, "Take her home. If you really want to live a decent life, find some honest work. If there are opportunities everywhere these days, stop drowning in your one-sided self-indulgent romanticism." He looked down at his hands, lost in thought. "But soon, these hands are meant to hold a pen. How could they possibly do manual labor? Let's just go back," he pleaded. "Let's live like we used to. I'll get rid of Emma. I'll send her away. You hate her, right? I'll fix it." But I had learned there's no waking a man who pretends to sleep. So I gave him one final piece of advice. 2 lives, David. Wake up. You're just not cut out to live off your pen." Then I looped my arm around the girls and headed into the nightclub. David lunged forward and tried to grab me, but they were stopped at the door. I said, "These 2 are beggars. Don't let them in." David's eyes turned bloodshot. "Shun, don't forget we're still legally married. How far do you think you can really go?" For a moment my steps faltered. Right. If we weren't divorced, half of everything I earned would still belong to him. That frustration lingered in my chest well into the next day at work. My boss noticed my low energy and asked what was wrong. When I explained, he waved it off like it was nothing. Oh, I thought it was something serious. Haven't you heard about the recent revisions to the marriage law? I hadn't. I didn't go to school much, I admitted, confused. But he had, and he explained it to me. According to the new regulation, if emotional bonds are broken and reconciliation fails, divorce is permitted. I stood there stunned. So escaping a sea of misery could be that simple. In my past life, I gave so much. And yes, I had thought about divorce in moments of despair, but I never knew who I could turn to. So I ended up asking my own child. But Emily told me that divorce was hard and troublesome. She said I was already too old, and that doing something like that would bring her shame. Then decades passed. My black hair turned white, and the idea of divorce faded away in the erosion of time. Hey Shin, are you crying? My boss panicked, seeing the tears welling up in my eyes. I wiped them away with my sleeve and gave him a crooked smile. No, it's nothing. I'm just really happy. With nervous anticipation, I waited for the mediation result. Not only were the staff from the Civil Affairs office present, but my boss came too. He pulled out a little green booklet and waved it in front of me. The process was ridiculous, he said. I pulled some strings and got it done for you. My hands trembled as I took that booklet from him. It felt like a rebirth. In a way, I was finally free. But as I stepped out of the mediation office, I ran straight into David. His face was stiff, like I owed him millions. His eyes were bloodshot. His voice rasped as he said, "Soon. He's still so young. Are you really going to abandon both of us?" I calmed myself, forced my expression to go blank, and said, "I'll send her child support every month at the minimum rate. The rest is up to you." He grabbed my arm. "What about me? How am I supposed to live?" My boss pulled me behind him, looking unimpressed. "You've got hands and feet. Why can't you live without a woman?" Then he suddenly lit up. "Oh, I get it now. You're a freeloader." That jab hit David right where it hurt. His scholarly elegance disappeared completely. "You damn. What nonsense are you spouting? My hands are meant for writing poetry, for publishing books, for becoming an official like my ancestors." My boss burst out laughing. "Didn't they bring back college entrance exams 2 years ago? You clearly didn't pass. So yeah, freeloading is your only skill. I've seen it all now." I gave him a thumbs up. Now that's what I call a real scholar. Every word cutting like a knife. David pointed at my boss and screamed, "It's people like you who ruined Shun. Otherwise, she would have stayed in the village taking care of me and our son." I slapped him hard across the face. "Shut up, David. You were useless in the last life, and you're just as useless in this one." He clutched his cheek, then suddenly let out 2 strange little chuckles. Then he raised his foot and kicked the iron door of the mediation office with full force. This whole judicial system is... I never agreed to the divorce. These new laws, none of them follow traditional virtues. Several staff members rushed forward to hold him back. David shouted desperately, "If the husband doesn't agree, how can the wife be allowed to leave?" I looked at him and felt a wave of sadness. In the past life, he always claimed to be a man of learning. And he loved to say I was outdated, a leftover from the old world, incapable of keeping up with the times. But now, I realized he was the one who couldn't move forward. I didn't say another word to him. I turned and walked away. Back at the factory, my boss called me into his office. "Sean," he said, "you know, I helped with your divorce, but I've got something to ask in return." I nodded. If it hadn't been for him, there's no way things would have gone that smoothly. He pulled out a few sketches. "Recognize these?" I looked closely. "Hey, I drew these." He smiled. "A talent like yours shouldn't be buried in the monotony of a workshop. I'll pay to send you for formal training. Think about it." I stood there frozen. He continued, "I want women like you, modern women, to have their talents seen beyond these walls. You should step into a wider world. That's where your light really belongs." His words dropped into my mind like a stone into still water, rippling through me. How could I say no? I almost dropped to my knees. Yes, yes, of course I'm willing." "Why are you crying again?" he asked, half laughing. I wiped my eyes and smeared the tears on the back of my hand. "Still happy tears," I said. "Ever since I left David and Emily behind, Every tear I shed has been for joy. Same old small leather suitcase, same few belongings inside. On the day I left, David somehow found out. He was squatting downstairs with Emily when I came out. "Sean, Mom," she called out, grabbing one of my hands while Emily clung to the other. Their filthy fingers smudged my crisp white shirt. I recoiled in disgust and pushed them off. David's eyes filled with murky tears. "Sean, I was wrong. I've wronged you across 2 lifetimes. Please give me a chance to make it right. Don't go. Please." Emily cried out too. "Mom, you're still the best. Aunt Emma only knows how to eat and have fun. She doesn't do anything. Please come home with us." At that point, I didn't even know what else to say. I only wanted to live a good life for myself. Just then a train whistle cut through the air. I sighed and looked at the man in front of me. "David," I said. "The traffic in the 1980s isn't slow at all. In the last life, you could have gone to find Emma, but you didn't because you couldn't let go of the comfort you had at home. Your yearning for her, your unfulfilled love, became the poetic tragedy that defined you. But what about me? Was I just collateral damage to your poetic character? Did I deserve to sacrifice my entire life for your literary aesthetic? Let me go in this life and the last. Just let me go." He still held on tightly. "No, I won't. I was foolish. It took me 2 lives to realize you're the one I've truly loved all along." I glanced at my watch. I was about to miss the train. "Let go," I shouted. They clung to me like weights dragging me down. Suddenly, headlights broke through the early morning fog. The girls from the factory jumped down from the back of a cargo truck. "Sister Han," one of them called. "We were afraid they'd slow you down, so we came to help you leave." Without hesitation, they pulled David and Emily aside. The truck honked again. My boss leaned out from the driver's seat. "Sean, are you getting in or not?" I rushed forward and jumped onto the truck bed. The truck started rolling. The girls waved from behind through the dust and shouted, "Safe travels, Sister Zhu. Go live a good life. Live for yourself." As the truck rumbled forward, my boss handed me a handkerchief. "Why are you crying again?" "I'm not out of tears," I joked. "Maybe I'm just too emotional." He chuckled. "You mean too sensitive?" Sunlight pierced through the clouds and glinted off my little leather suitcase. It sparkled like tiny flecks of gold. This time, I was finally chasing what I wanted. Years later, when I returned to the village to transfer my household registration, I heard the neighbors talking. Back then, David and Emma had written to her, bragging about their factory, their house, their savings, inviting her to come live with them. She came but didn't get to enjoy much of anything. After just a few days, she was being chased for debts over a couple of dresses. And for a so-called scholar, nothing stings quite like losing face. Eventually, Emma realized David still hadn't brought me back. With the house running out of food, she packed up the last few valuables from his place and ran off. I rested my hand on the solid, genuine Hermes bag I now carried, and exchanged a few signs of mock sympathy with the villagers. On my way back to the car, stepping over the muddy paths, I saw a hunched figure stumbling through the rice fields. He looked vaguely familiar. I took a closer look and couldn't believe it. It was David. He had a tattered cloth bag slung over his shoulder filled with a few heart-shaped stones. Muttering to himself, he repeated, "My ancestors were scholars and officials. I'm destined for greatness too." Leaning calmly against a tree, I watched him as Emily ran after him with a spatula in hand. "Dad, don't wander off. It's almost time to eat." Crushed under the weight of survival, there wasn't even a shadow left of the proud, poetic man he used to be. Whatever false nobility he had in our past life, it was completely gone now. Emily couldn't catch up. She stopped, panting heavily, and then turned, locking eyes with me. She rubbed her eyes in disbelief. "Mom, it's me," she cried. "Take me with you. I want to go to the city, too." I quickly stepped onto the truck, leaving behind nothing but the exhaust fumes for her to taste. Everything here slowly disappeared in my rearview mirror, fading farther and farther away. Ahead of me was my own Roman road.